I never imagined I'd find myself in this situation. My wife, Jenna, and I had what seemed like a perfect marriage. We met in college, bonded over late-night study sessions, and eventually built a life together with our adorable 4-year-old son, Aiden. Life felt good, until it didn't. Lately, things had felt off. Jenna started coming home late more often, claiming work was overwhelming. She's always been dedicated to her job as a project manager, but this was different. I found myself clocking her late nights and last-minute client dinners, which, let's be honest, sounded more like excuses than actual events. It wasn't long before the vibe shifted. She was less interested in sex, snappy over the smallest things, and avoided eye contact. I asked her if everything was okay, and she snapped back. Seriously, Tom? Not everything is about you. That's dumb. I felt like I was going crazy, but the signs were piling up. She started taking her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom, and I could feel her distance growing. The woman who used to leave her phone out and share everything suddenly became secretive. Still, I didn't want to believe the worst. I figured it was stress from work. After all, life with a toddler can be overwhelming. But the gut feeling gnawed at me. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't ignore the pit in my stomach any longer. One evening, after putting Aiden to bed, I decided to do some cleaning around the house. Jenna was supposed to be at a networking event, but I noticed she hadn't left yet. Her phone was sitting on the kitchen counter, and I did something I never thought I'd do. I picked it up. My heart raced, and I felt a mix of guilt and urgency. At first, I just scrolled through her messages. Most of it was work-related, but then I saw a thread with a guy named Mark. They were exchanging flirty messages, emojis, heart reactions, and things that felt way too personal. My stomach dropped. The last message from Mark read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. I'll make it worth your while." Winking face. I felt sick. It was like the world around me spun out of control. How could she do this? I felt a mix of anger and betrayal boiling inside me, and I couldn't breathe. I set the phone back down, almost dropping it as my hands shook. Suddenly, the door opened, and Jenna walked in, her face lighting up when she saw me. But that spark faded quickly when she noticed my expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, feigning concern. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Who's Mark?" I blurted out, my voice trembling. Her face turned pale, and in that moment I knew she was caught. She hesitated, looking like a deer in headlights, and then she put on her best innocent face. "What are you talking about, Tom? Mark is just a coworker. You know how it is at the office." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. She was lying to my face. It felt like a punch to the gut. "Just a coworker?" I echoed, my voice rising. "You call sending flirty texts to some guy just a coworker?" I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, anger pouring out like a boiling kettle. Jenna's eyes darted around the room, searching for a way out. She tried to play it cool, rolling her eyes as if I was the one overreacting. "Tom, you're being ridiculous. You have no idea what you're talking about. I was just being friendly, okay?" "Friendly?" I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "You think heart emojis and plans to make it worth his while are just friendly? That's not how it works, Jenna. You've been lying to me for who knows how long." Her demeanor shifted, the facade cracked. She crossed her arms defensively, her tone turning harsh. "You always jump to conclusions. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with monitoring my every move, I wouldn't have to hide anything." That comment stung, like a knife twisting in an open wound. "I'm not monitoring you. I'm concerned because you've changed. You come home late, you avoid me, and now this? I didn't want to believe you were cheating on me. Maybe you should have trusted me instead of snooping around." She shot back, her voice rising. "This is so typical of you, Tom. You always think the worst of me." "Typical?" I nearly shouted, feeling the walls close in around me. "I just found out my wife is cheating on me, and you're the one playing the victim?" She didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she offered up a half-hearted excuse, saying it was just a fling, and that it didn't mean anything. "It's not like we've been intimate in ages anyway," she added, her voice dripping with bitterness. Her words hit me hard, twisting my heart in knots. "You think that justifies this? We have a son together. This isn't just about us anymore." Jenna shrugged, her indifference cutting deeper than any argument. "Well, maybe if you had been more attentive, I wouldn't have felt the need to look elsewhere." In that moment, I felt completely hollow. The woman I loved, the mother of my child, was standing there, blaming me for her betrayal. That I stood there, frozen, as Jenna's words echoed in my mind. How had we reached this point? I felt an avalanche of emotions crashing over me: anger, disbelief, profound sadness. I thought of Aiden, blissfully unaware of the chaos unfolding between his parents. The reality of the situation hit me like a freight train. I had spent years building a life with Jenna, pouring my heart into our family, and now she was throwing it away over some guy she barely knew. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her understand how much this hurt me. But instead, I felt a crushing sense of defeat. "Do you even care about what you've done?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I thought we had something real. How could you do this to us?" I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me break down. She rolled her eyes again, but this time I saw a flicker of guilt pass across her face. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she said, her tone softening slightly. "But it's not like we've been happy, Tom. You've been so consumed with work and life that I felt neglected. So cheating on me is your solution?" I shot back, incredulous. "You couldn't have just talked to me about how you felt? Instead, you betray me, and now it's all my fault?" She opened her mouth to argue but then closed it, perhaps realizing the futility of her excuses. I could see her walls crumbling just a bit, but it wasn't enough to change what had happened. I felt this strange mixture of anger and sadness washing over me. Part of me wanted to shake her awake and make her see how awful this was. Another part of me just wanted to curl up and cry. I felt lost. The woman I had built my life with felt like a stranger, and the anger inside me battled with the love I still had for her. As she stood there, arms crossed and defiant, I couldn't help but wonder if we could ever go back to what we had, or if it was all just a facade, crumbling away in front of my eyes. After that night, everything felt different. The air in our home was thick with tension, and the silence felt heavy. I spent days in a fog, replaying our confrontation over and over in my head. I'd look at Aiden and feel an ache deep in my chest, knowing his innocence was caught in the middle of our turmoil. I needed to figure out what to do next. I tried to have conversations with Jenna, but they always ended in more accusations and hurtful words. I'd bring up counseling, hoping we could work through this mess together, but she brushed it off. "You really think talking to some stranger will fix this?" she scoffed, and each time, I felt more hopeless. Eventually, I realized something. I couldn't keep living like this. I felt like a shadow in my own life, watching a relationship I once cherished fade away. I deserved better, and Aiden deserved better. One evening, after putting Aiden to bed, I confronted Jenna again. "We can't keep pretending everything is okay," I said firmly. "This isn't working for me. I can't be in a marriage where I can't trust my partner." Her expression softened for a moment, but she quickly masked it with a defensive tone. "You're being dramatic, Tom. We can fix this." "Fix what? Your betrayal? The lies?" I shook my head. "I can't do this anymore. I need to protect myself and our son." As the words left my mouth, a sense of clarity washed over me. I realized I had been holding on to the idea of our marriage, not the reality of it. We weren't a team anymore. We were just two people living in the same house, tangled in resentment and heartbreak. I told her I was considering separation. Her reaction was a mix of anger and desperation. "You're throwing everything away!" she shouted, but the more I thought about it, the more I felt it was the right choice. I couldn't stay in a toxic environment, especially when it affected Aiden. That night, I packed a few things and stayed with my brother. It was a surreal feeling, leaving the house I had built, but I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I needed to prioritize my mental health and, more importantly, be the best father I could be for Aiden. The days that followed my decision to separate were a whirlwind of emotions. I felt both liberated and terrified. Living with my brother gave me a chance to breathe and think, but it was also painfully lonely. I missed Aiden desperately, and the guilt of not being there for him gnawed at my insides. I started visiting him regularly, trying to keep our routine as normal as possible. He would run into my arms with that innocent joy, and my heart would swell, knowing I was doing this for him. During those early days, I reflected a lot on what had gone wrong in my marriage with Jenna. I replayed moments in my head, searching for clues, thinking about the love we once shared. It hurt to admit it, but our relationship had become a ticking time bomb long before the affair. Communication had broken down, and I had let my own work and stress overshadow our connection. But that didn't excuse her betrayal. I began to understand that her choice to cheat was not just a reflection of our relationship's struggles, but also a failure on her part to confront her own unhappiness. It was hard to accept that the woman I loved could so easily choose someone else over us, but I realized I couldn't shoulder the blame for her decisions. I also started talking to a therapist, which helped me process everything I was feeling: anger, sadness, and betrayal. It was a relief to voice my thoughts to someone who didn't know either of us. Through those sessions, I learned about the importance of setting boundaries and maintaining self-worth. I realized I had to prioritize my own emotional health first, and that didn't mean I loved Aiden any less. As the weeks turned into months, I slowly accepted the reality of my situation. I'd never imagined I'd be in this position, but I found strength in my newfound independence. I started to rediscover hobbies I had neglected, and I focused on being the best dad I could be. I even began to feel a flicker of hope for the future, like maybe this was a chance for a fresh start, not just for me, but for Aiden as well. The biggest lesson I took away from all of this was the importance of honesty in a relationship, both with your partner and yourself. I realized that if Jenna had been more open about her feelings, maybe we could have found a way to work through our problems together. I also learned that sometimes, letting go is the healthiest choice you can make, even if it feels devastating at the time. And with that, I felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that I had the power to rebuild my life. After a few months of separation, I found myself in a much better place. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were still nights I'd lay awake, staring at the ceiling, memories of Jenna and our life together swirling in my mind. But there were also moments of clarity and joy, especially when I was with Aiden. I started to establish a routine that felt healthier and more balanced. I'd take Aiden to the park on weekends, and we'd have movie nights with popcorn and ice cream. I relished those simple, sweet moments that reminded me of what truly mattered. He was my priority, and I was determined to be a positive force in his life, no matter what. Jenna, on the other hand, was still trying to navigate her own feelings. She reached out a couple of times to talk, and part of me was curious about how she was handling everything. During one of our conversations, I could hear the guilt in her voice. "I messed up, Tom. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't think about how it would affect you or Aiden." I appreciated the apology, but it didn't erase the pain she caused. I told her, "I get that you're struggling, but you made a choice. You chose to betray my trust. I can't just forget that." It felt good to stand firm and set that boundary. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just resolute. Over time, Jenna and I found a way to co-parent. It took patience and some awkward conversations, but we learned to communicate better. I saw glimpses of the woman I once loved, and I realized I could respect her as the mother of my child without romanticizing our past. As I rebuilt my life, I also started dating again. I was cautious, of course. Trust was hard to come by after everything. I met a wonderful woman named Sarah through mutual friends. We hit it off immediately, and she understood my situation. I appreciated her kindness and the way she respected my pace. I was still healing, but it felt good to be open to new possibilities. I wasn't looking to jump into anything serious right away, but having someone to share laughter and experiences with felt refreshing. Sarah never pushed for more than I was ready to give, and it allowed me to ease back into dating without feeling overwhelmed. Through all this, I began to understand that life doesn't just stop after betrayal, it continues. It's not easy, and the scars from the past remain, but they also become part of your story. I learned to embrace vulnerability and authenticity, and I promised myself never to lose sight of what truly mattered, being a good father and finding joy in life again. Every day was a step forward, and I was learning to trust myself again. I was no longer the guy who felt betrayed. I was becoming someone who could look forward to the future with hope and resilience. Looking back on everything, I feel a mix of sadness and gratitude. Sadness for the way my marriage ended and for the time I lost, but gratitude for the lessons I learned along the way. It's strange to think how one person's choices can shake your entire world, but I've come to realize that I'm not defined by what Jenna did. I'm defined by how I respond to it. I've learned that communication is key, not just in romantic relationships but in every connection we make. If Jenna and I had been more open about our feelings, we might have been able to navigate our struggles without reaching such a painful breaking point. I often find myself thinking about how important it is to really listen, to hear what someone is saying, not just what you want to hear. One of the biggest takeaways from this whole experience is the importance of self-worth. I spent too much time in a relationship where I felt I had to compromise my happiness to keep things together. I learned that my feelings mattered, and that I deserved honesty and respect. It's empowering to recognize your value and to stand up for it, even when it's hard. As for Aiden, he's thriving, and that's what matters most. I make it a priority to create a stable, loving environment for him. I want him to know that even when things change, he can always count on me. I hope to raise him with an understanding of how to communicate openly and respectfully, so he'll know how to build strong, healthy relationships in his own life. As for my relationship with Jenna, it's slowly evolving into a more amicable co-parenting dynamic. There's still tension sometimes, and I know there will be bumps along the way, but I can see us working toward a healthier partnership for Aiden's sake. I don't think we'll ever go back to what we had, and that's okay. I've come to terms with the fact that sometimes things fall apart so something better can take their place. Now, as I continue dating Sarah, I'm approaching it with an open heart and cautious optimism. I'm not rushing into anything, I'm learning to enjoy the process. I'm excited to see where things go with her, and I feel ready to embrace new experiences without the weight of my past dragging me down. For anyone out there going through something similar, know this: healing takes time, and it's okay to feel hurt. Don't shy away from your emotions, but don't let them consume you either. Surround yourself with supportive people, focus on what brings you joy, and take each day as it comes. Life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. And if you keep moving forward, you might just find something beautiful waiting on the other side.